Hey everyone, it's Libby. So I want to welcome you guys back to the WootRecruit YouTube channel. What is WootRecruit? Well, we are a recruiting program designed specifically for the high turnover industry. If you're in lawn care, cleaning, construction, roofing, you name it, we are your go-to source for your recruiting tips and tools. Stay tuned for this episode so you guys can learn how to revolutionize your recruiting. And I want to welcome our guest today, Chris Volpe. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Chris. I worked at Service Autopilot for a decade. Now I run a house cleaning business, a residential cleaning business, and we also do window washing as well.
Awesome. So I love having Chris here on this episode because we were just prepping for the show and we were talking about a topic. And I wanted to ask him, well, I asked him before we started, but now I want to ask him while we're recording. What is how does it feel different? Is it harder when it comes to culture? So he went from having a big team to now having his own team. What's that feel like? And what are the challenges you see when it comes to that culture building aspect?
Yeah. Well, I think looking back on my time at Service Autopilot, I took for granted all of the things that they did in order to really promote a good culture, because Service Autopilot had a fantastic culture. And it's the little things that really kind of added up. And then once you had the right management in place and they were a torch bearer for the culture, like that's kind of how it grew. It kind of like spread. So step into where I am now. Now I'm running a residential cleaning and window washing business, and I see my team, they're doing jobs for me on a day-to-day basis every single day, but I see them in person rarely because, I'm running there's no reason for me to have an office. It keeps my overhead low. But they're out in the field. And so, it's a lot harder to implement that culture whenever we see each other less. And like what you said, Libby, I have a tech background and a SaaS background. And so hopping on a Zoom call or doing this is like super easy for me because I lived on Zoom, especially through the pandemic. And that's not necessarily the case with people who are in the home services industry. Maybe your technicians and things like that. They're like, hop on a Zoom call. Like, what is Zoom? And so it really it's like this, like meet people where they're at. Like, how do you keep them engaged and interested? But I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling now, but it's a challenge to establish that culture.
And in Service Autopilot, you guys weren't with each other. Like you didn't work in an actual office, correct?
Yeah, we didn't. So we did. And then the pandemic happened, and then no one went back to the office. And so we went remote. But we would implement things like we would do Scrum meetings. We kind of Scrum-ish meetings. And what Scrum is it's a set of criteria of how to meet with your team in a very organized way. So what we would do is we would have a 15-minute daily stand-up where we would say, hey, we would answer 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And these are the issues or the challenges that I'm facing. And then the team would try to solve those challenges. And that would create accountability virtually. So, we'd have like a central board, like an electronic board, either on Monday or Trello or something like that. And we would just we would see what everyone had and all the different cards and what they had to do. And so that was a way to really kind of help that culture be there, that accountability be there, the productivity be there, even though we weren't meeting in an office every single day.
And I think this is a great topic because I think a lot of home service businesses since COVID they have went more remote, more hybrid remote. Schedulers or salespeople may be remote. So if we did have an office or we do have an office, it's been scaled back. I know us at Organize It, we are scaling our office back. I mean, it's an ego. This is 100% ego. It's my ego. Um, it's so sad. Like, I don't need a giant office. I have an office with like 8 offices, a lobby, and a conference room, and there's one person sitting in there. Um, so we finally came to the realization that we don't need this office. My sales is remote, marketing is remote. I have 2 salespeople; they're both remote. My HR person, she's remote. So the only person that's sitting in there out of like 5 or 6 people is one person. And so we made the decision to get rid of the big office and we're scaling back. We're going to a shared office space because not even our technicians come in. So we need to start looking at our field staff like remote employees. But the challenge in lies, like Chris just said, how do you meet them where they're at? Are they going to be comfortable coming on Zoom? Are they comfortable using Trello? Probably, I think it's different because it's just a different caliber of people, but also just a different skill set. We talked he just did fearlessness with me. And we talked about how he realized cleaning is actually like a really high skill set. It is a trade. And ISSA, I love ISSA. And if you're not a member, you should join. ISSA talks about how they're really trying to push it, that cleaning is looked at like a skilled trade, because it is. And it's much more difficult than people think it is. It takes training, and it's a profession. It should be looked at like that. But how do we meet them where they're at? So Chris, are you working on anything? Do you have any ideas? What are some of the things that you're thinking about doing?
So one of the things that I'm thinking about doing, and this is taking a playbook out of Jonathan at City Turf. I remember him telling me, and this was years ago, and this always stuck with me. He would just he would stand. He would have a foreman stand at the gate, and this is even before they went over to a mobile app. Like they had their paper, and then they would hand it to each crew. And it was just that touch point, that daily touch point of hey, you've got this client today. Remember these details about the client. Just giving them just slightly more touch points, slightly more context behind the why. It really, he attributes a lot of that to why they've got so many fantastic reviews. It's just spend just a little bit more time, and so I remind myself of that. So I'm not necessarily meeting them in person on a day-to-day basis, but I'll think through. Like we just had a new customer sign up, and it was just I met with them in person. It was the first time they really kind of interviewed me, which was a really neat experience. I was actually happy for that because I got a lot of really good insight, and then I was able to take notes and then just put those into the job notes. And it's very similar to that, so take all of the information that they gave, because I feel like maybe it's easy to receive information, but it's really hard sometimes to convey that information to your team. We would see that time and time again of like, oh man, I can't tell you how many times internally the biggest complaint at Service Autopilot was just communication. It is so hard to communicate. And I think the bigger you get, the harder it gets too. So I think just finding that system, whether it's electronic and paper, whatever that system is, just stick to it, and maybe over communicate things that like maybe the team doesn't know about that. That was one thing that Jonathan was always fantastic about. I can remember times when we were sitting in a conference room and he was just so transparent and honest with everyone at Service Autopilot. There were so many times where we'd have a meeting and we would kind of be doing a retrospective with just like the employees afterwards and be like, man, I can't believe he told us that. Like he was so honest. And I think if you can kind of take that, like kind of like over explain and overshare, it does something to the employee morale where they're like, man, they're actually trusting me with information and talking to me like I'm an adult and like I'm a stakeholder. And what that does is that it just created more buy-in. And so I'm trying to do the same thing with my technicians and my employees.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love the over communicating and sharing That's one of the things we decided to do in all of my companies is we share numbers transparently. We share information transparently. We share profit. And one of the things we did in one of the companies that really worked for us was we created a communication cadence. That way, employees or the company itself they know what to expect as far as how does the company communicate? How often am I going to hear from the boss or the owner? How can I expect it to be delivered? And that has really helped us in one of the companies. I have yet to do it in organize it because it's different with software. It's actually much easier with a software team because of their level of comfortability with technology versus the home service company. So that's something that we're still working on, and we're doing a few things, but at the end of the day, I have to say it was much easier for us to do it in the software than it was in the home service company. So love this topic. And, as far as culture goes, are you working on any things to do from a remote standpoint to help build that culture besides the communication, over communicate? Any ideas? Are you guys going to do quarterlies, anything like that in person?
I don't know, to be completely honest. Yeah. Like I think that I'm still in such an early phase in the business where I definitely see, I think about EOS and running the business that way. But I do think that that's kind of a couple of steps ahead of I'm still trying to lay the foundation of the company and grow it. And then I think establishing that in the business. But I definitely have it. Like it's on the radar, like it's in the purview as we grow, like making sure, because like right now I'm doing all the communicating and I know that's not sustainable. And so it's like whenever I need to bring someone on to do that, to be the ops manager or whatever, or the office manager, they could step into that role. Then having those quarterly meetings, having the goals, having the North Star. That was something that was really big at Service Autopilot and Explore, after the acquisition was what's the North Star. And so I want to implement that, but I don't feel like I'm really at a place where I can implement that. Or if I did, it would really just be for me. And maybe, that's really important too. Cause like there are days, we've been talking about this. There are days where I'm like, I don't know what I should be working on. But if you do have that North Star, then it's really easy to kind of go back to like, okay, well, what's going to get me to that result? Because everything else just needs to fall by the wayside.
Yes. So one tip for you, Chris, and I did this about a year ago, and it doesn't matter your size, is I read the book Vivid Vision. Ooh. And it is, and for our listeners, we'll make sure to put Vivid Vision in the show notes, but it's by Cameron Herold. So great book, changed my life, changed my business, changed how I look at my business. And for those that are listening that may not have that North Star, or maybe I have an idea of it in my head, but I don't know how to convey it to my employees, I don't know how to capture it. Vivid Vision gives you a framework and walks you through how to write and deliver, even gives you examples of what is my business going to look like in 3 years? What's it going to feel like? What are people saying? What softwares do I use? What communication am I using? But it gives you a high level overview of what that looks like. And that changed everything for me because that gave me so much direction. And like mine is 18 or 19 pages long. It's not just like a vision statement. Wow. It is a very detailed document that's beautiful because then you're going to give it to your employees and you're going to give it to vendors and you're going to give it to your applicants to say, if you want on this ride, here's the ride. If you want on, join us. So we rolled this out and I love the Vivid Vision, and I rolled it out to WootRecruit. We did a Zoom. I gave them all the digital version. They loved it. We talk about it all the time. We make sure every decision around that we make is based around that. And then I rolled it out to organize it. And because we're field staff, I went and I printed them. And I only printed enough for the technicians because I gave the office staff the digital version because we printed them on nice paper. We put them in a nice binded them. And it was so funny because I said, oh, we'll have some extra. Not everyone will take one home. I want to leave like a couple in the office for the people that come to interview to look at them. Every single person took it home. So they're like, can I have the book? I want to put it on my coffee table. I want to show my husband. My office staff said, well, we didn't get a book. I'm like, I gave you the digital version. But what I found it amazed me what it found is it gave them something to say, like, I'm on this ride. Like, this is what we're working for. This is why I wake up every day and clean a house or sit in traffic to get to my next job. It gave the bigger purpose that I probably was not the greatest at communicating or conveying. It gave them a real tangible of, this is what I'm a part of, and I want to show everybody else. So, I highly recommend you read the book. He gives you the whole framework. He walks you through how to do it. Read the book. For our listeners, highly recommend you read it. He also has a consulting agency if you want to just hire them to do it for you. You can also do that too. But, well, Chris, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you for sharing. I thought it was really great perspective of like coming from a company, especially a larger company, then to owning your own business. And what does that culture look like from an employee standpoint to now like, oh crap, now I'm in charge of culture. Mm-hmm. How do I do this?
Yep.
And I always say culture is probably one of the hardest things in the company to measure, because what is the KPI for culture?
So true.
It's so hard to measure. So it's that thing we're all trying to chase and master. But I want to thank you again for being a guest on the WootRecruit YouTube channel. And it's been a pleasure. And I really hope for our listeners, you guys got some great insight and perspective, and you can use these insights to transform your hiring, recruiting, and culture. So for more insights and strategies, make sure you subscribe and follow us on YouTube. Until next time, keep pushing those boundaries that you thought were possible when it comes to your recruiting, hiring, and culture. Let's make recruiting your superpower. Until the next episode, guys.